You are 22 years old, and someone hands you a check for $186,000. You look at it. You hold it. You feel the weight of what that kind of money could do for your life at 65. And then you tear it up. You tear it into small pieces and you drop them in the trash on your way to grab coffee. You would never do that. Nobody would. But there is a very good chance you already did, and you didn't even feel it leave your hands, because it left slowly, $50 a month at a time, over decades, in decisions that felt like nothing. This is not a video about dramatic financial disasters. Nobody here lost a fortune day trading or got swindled by a crypto scheme. This is about the ordinary, completely reasonable, totally understandable habits that most people carry through their 20s without a second thought, and what those habits actually cost when you let the math run long enough. The number in the title is not clickbait. It is arithmetic. And by the end of this, you will know exactly where it comes from, dollar by dollar, because we are going to calculate it together in public, with no rounding in anyone's favor. Let me start with the one that hurts the most, because it is also the simplest. You are 22. You just got your first real job. Someone in HR mentions a retirement account during orientation, somewhere between the parking pass and the dental plan, and you think, yeah, I'll get to that. $50 a month. What is that going to do? That is a cell phone bill. That is 2 decent dinners. You have student loans. You have rent. You have a life that costs money right now, today, and retirement is 43 years away, which might as well be on another planet. So you skip it. Here is what $50 a month does when you give it 43 years. At a 7% average annual return, which is approximately the historical inflation-adjusted return of the broad stock market going back to 1926 per Morningstar's data, $50 a month from age 22 grows to roughly $186,000 by age 65. Your total out-of-pocket contribution over those 43 years is $25,800. The remaining $160,000 is compound growth. Money made by money made by money. While you were sleeping, working, living your life, doing nothing except not canceling a $50 monthly transfer. Now, watch what happens when you wait. Same $50, same 7%. But you start at 32 instead of 22. 1 decade later, the result at 65 drops to roughly $86,000. That 10-year delay didn't cost you 10 years of contributions. It cost you $100,000 in final value. Wait until 42 and you are looking at about $38,000. Same $50, same market. A 20-year delay cost you $148,000. And here is the number that should keep you up tonight if you are watching this at 45 and wishing someone had told you. A person who invests $50 a month from age 22 to 32, just 10 years, and then stops completely, never puts in another dime, ends up with roughly $96,000 at 65. A person who waits until 35 and invests $50 a month for 30 years, 3 times as long, ends up with roughly $61,000. The person who invested for 10 years and quit beats the person who invested for 30 years, but started late, by $35,000. That is not opinion. That is not motivation. That is what happens when a number multiplies itself for 43 years versus 30 years. The curve is not linear. It is exponential, and the early years are where the curve bends. But $50 a month is just the floor. Because most people with jobs also have something else sitting on the table that they are not picking up. If your employer offers a retirement plan with a match, and the most common structure, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, is 50 cents on the dollar up to 6% of your salary, then not contributing is not just skipping savings. It is declining free compensation. On a $40,000 salary, a 3% contribution gets you $1,200 a year from your paycheck and $600 from your employer. That's $600 a year of match money invested at 7% over 43 years compounds to roughly $186,000 on its own. Just the match, just the part that was already budgeted for you, that your employer set aside with your name on it, that you left on the table because the enrollment form had a lot of checkboxes and you figured you would get to it next quarter. Now let's talk about what happens with that enrollment form, because this is where it gets quiet and expensive. When you get auto-enrolled in a retirement plan, which became common after the Pension Protection Act of 2006, the system sets defaults for you, and the default contribution rate is typically 3%. Not because 3% is good, not because 3% is enough, because 3% is the rate that generated the fewest complaints from employers worried about employees noticing smaller paychecks. It is an administrative convenience dressed up as a starting point. Vanguard's How America Saves report, analyzing 5 million participant accounts in 2024, found that 57% of auto-enrolled participants were still at the default contribution rate 3 years later. They never changed it, not because they decided 3% was right, but because the form was already filled in and changing it felt like a task for next month. Behavioral economists have a name for this. Brigitte Madrian at Harvard documented it 20 years ago. The power of defaults is enormous. People intend to do the right thing. They just don't get around to overriding the checkbox. The cost of that checkbox, 3% of a $40,000 salary with a 50% match up to 6%, gives you $1,800 a year going in. At 7% over 43 years, that grows to about $559,000. Now, bump your contribution to 10%. Same salary, same match. Your total annual contribution jumps to $5,200. That grows to roughly $1.6 million. The difference is over $1 million. And the difference in your monthly paycheck between 3% and 10% on a $40,000 salary is about $233 a month. That is the cost of never spending 15 minutes on the enrollment form. Let me pause here, because I want to make sure something lands. None of these are reckless decisions. Skipping $50 a month when you are 22 and broke feels rational. Taking the default on a form you barely understand feels reasonable. These are not mistakes born of laziness or ignorance. They are mistakes born of the fact that the most powerful force in personal finance, compound interest, is deeply unintuitive. The human brain does not think in exponential curves. It thinks in straight lines. And in a straight line, $50 a month for 43 years is $25,800, which is real money, but not life-changing. The curve is where the magic lives, and nobody shows you the curve. So let's keep going, because the next one connects to everything. You are 23. You have a credit card, maybe 2. You are not doing anything wild with them. You miss a payment because you switched bank accounts and forgot to update the auto-pay. You miss another one 3 months later because you were between jobs. You have one card close to its limit because you put a security deposit and some furniture on it when you moved. You are not worried about your credit score because you are not buying a house. You are 23. Houses are for later. 5 years pass. You're 28 now, and you want to buy a car. Or you're 30, and you're looking at a mortgage, and you discover that your credit score is 700 instead of 760. 60 points. Sounds like nothing. On a $300,000, 30-year fixed mortgage, Here is what 60 points cost you. FICO's published rate tables as of January 2025 show a spread of roughly 0.6 of a percentage point between a 760 score and a 660 score. On that $300,000 loan, the difference in total interest paid over 30 years is approximately $47,000. $47,000 because you missed 2 credit card payments and maxed out a card when you were 24. $47,000 because your credit score is a number you never look at until you need it. And by then, the damage has been compounding for years. Your credit score is the most expensive number you have never checked. And it gets worse because these habits don't live in isolation. They cascade. You are 25. You chose the cheapest health insurance plan because you are young and healthy, and the bronze plan saves you $80 a month over the silver. That is $960 a year. You feel smart, you feel like you're optimizing. Then you slip on ice, or your appendix decides it's done, or you get a kidney stone at 2 in the morning, and the emergency room bill comes back at $8,000 because your bronze plan deductible is north of $7,000. The Kaiser Family Foundation's 2024 survey puts the average individual bronze plan deductible at approximately $7,151. You don't have $8,000. Nobody handed you an emergency fund at orientation. The Federal Reserve's own survey found that 37% of Americans cannot cover an unexpected $400 expense with cash. You are 25. 400 was the threshold. You just got hit with 8,000. So it goes on a credit card at an average rate of 21.76% per the Federal Reserve's data from the fourth quarter of 2024. You pay the minimum because the minimum is what you can afford, and honestly, the minimum payment feels like it's what you're supposed to pay. That is not an accident. The Credit Card Act of 2009 required issuers to print a warning on your statement showing what happens if you pay only the minimum. They had to be forced by law to tell you because the minimum payment is designed to maximize the interest you pay, not to help you get out of debt. $8,000 at 22% paid minimum takes years to clear and costs you thousands in interest. But that is not even the real damage. The real damage is that unpaid medical debt. The CFPB found $88 billion of it sitting on American credit reports in 2022, hits your credit score, which connects back to that 60-point mortgage gap, which connects back to $47,000. The $80 a month you saved on insurance premiums became $8,000 in medical debt, which became 60 points off your credit score, which became $47,000 in extra mortgage interest over 30 years. That is not bad luck. That is compounding working against you instead of for you. And while all of this is happening, while the ER bill is on the credit card and the credit card is accruing interest and the credit score is quietly dropping, you do something that feels completely reasonable. You pause your retirement contributions, just for a year, just until things stabilize. The Employee Benefit Research Institute's 2024 analysis found that financial shocks without savings buffers are the primary trigger for pausing retirement contributions. You are not being irresponsible. You are surviving. But that 1 year of paused contributions at 25, at $50 a month, costs you roughly $12,000 in compound growth by 65. And if the stress pushes you to take a hardship withdrawal from your retirement account, the 10% early withdrawal penalty plus income taxes mean that pulling out $5,000 actually costs you $6,500 to $7,500. Plus the permanent loss of whatever that money would have grown into over 40 years. It feels like being practical. The math says it is the most expensive kind of practical there is. Let me slow down for a second here because I want to acknowledge something. If you are watching this and you are past your 20s and you are recognizing your own choices in every single one of these habits, I need you to hear this clearly. You were not stupid. You were not careless. You were making decisions that felt perfectly rational in the moment, with information nobody gave you, in a system that was not designed to show you the long-term math. Every one of these habits feels innocent because, in isolation, at age 23, they are innocent. The damage is not in any single choice. The damage is in the compounding. And compounding is invisible until it is not. So let's talk about the quiet ones. The ones that don't even feel like financial decisions. You got your first salary offer, and you took it. 61% of workers accept the first offer without negotiating, per a 2024 survey. On a $45,000 starting salary, negotiating to $50,000, a difference of $5,000. A single conversation that takes 15 minutes compounds across your entire career. Every raise after that is a percentage of a higher base. Every employer after that sees a higher prior salary. Over 43 years, with identical 3% annual raises, the non-negotiator earns roughly $4 million cumulative. The negotiator earns $4.44 million. The gap is $440,000 in gross earnings. From one conversation you did not have because it felt awkward. You use a debit card for everything because it feels responsible. You are spending your own money, not borrowing. But you are also building zero credit history, which feeds directly back into the credit score problem. And you are foregoing consumer protections. The Fair Credit Billing Act caps your liability for unauthorized credit card charges at $50. For debit cards under the Electronic Fund Transfer Act, the number is $500 if you don't report within 2 days, and unlimited after 60 days. You are also leaving cash back on the table. A conservative 1.5% on $30,000 in annual spending is $450 a year. Invested at 7% over 43 years, that cashback stream alone compounds to roughly $139,000. Not because cashback is a wealth strategy, because small, consistent amounts fed into a compounding engine for 4 decades produce numbers that do not feel possible at 23. You carry a credit card balance because everyone you know carries a credit card balance. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York reported total revolving consumer credit at approximately $1.36 trillion in the third quarter of 2024. If you maintain a $3,000 balance at 22% for 10 years, just paying interest, you hand over roughly $6,600. Those interest payments, invested instead at 7% from age 24, would have been worth about $47,000 by 65. You have subscriptions you forgot you had. A 2024 survey found that the average American spent about $219 a month on subscriptions, but estimated they spent only $86. That gap, $133 a month in untracked spending. Even conservatively, $50 a month in subscriptions you are not using. That $50 a month, invested at 7% over 43 years, is $186,000. The same number from the opening. If you just nodded at that last sentence, you already know this pattern. You have just never seen someone add it all up. So let's add it up. Not starting retirement savings at 22, delaying 10 years. Roughly $100,000 in lost compound growth. The cheap health insurance plan leading to medical debt, credit damage, and paused contributions. Conservatively, $35,000 to $50,000 in compounded costs. The credit score neglect over 5 years. $47,000 in excess mortgage interest. The default retirement plan allocation at 3% instead of spending 15 minutes choosing a higher rate. 200,000 or more in lost growth depending on salary and match. The salary you didn't negotiate. Tens of thousands in foregone earnings. The subscriptions you forgot. The credit card interest you normalized. The debit card that built no credit. These are not 12 catastrophes. These are 12 defaults. 12 moments where the path of least resistance was the path of greatest long-term cost. And together, across a working lifetime, they do not just reach $500,000. They exceed it comfortably. And the interactions between them, the medical debt that damages the credit score, that raises the mortgage rate, that reduces the money available for investing, create a cascade where each habit makes the others worse. Here is what I need you to sit with. The system did not hide this math from you on purpose. There is no conspiracy. But nobody in the transaction was paid to show it to you either. Not the insurance company that offered you the cheap plan. Not the employer who set the default at 3%. Not the credit card company whose minimum payment schedule maximizes their interest income. Not the HR representative who spent 45 seconds on the retirement plan during a 2-hour orientation. Everybody in the chain followed their incentive. And their incentive was not your long-term outcome. Compound interest works in both directions. It builds wealth when it runs in your favor, and it builds debt when it runs against you. Every habit in this video is an example of compounding running against ordinary, reasonable people who simply were not shown the curve. If you are 45 or 55 watching this and feeling the weight of what these numbers mean for decisions you made 2 decades ago, I want to be honest with you. You cannot go back. The 22-year-old math is gone. But the curve does not care what age you start. It only cares how long it gets to run. You have years, maybe 20, maybe 25. And the same mechanics that turned $50 into $186,000 over 43 years will turn larger contributions into real money over your remaining horizon. The catch-up contribution limits exist for this reason. The IRS allows an extra $7,500 a year into your 401k after 50, an extra $1,000 into your IRA. Those provisions are there because someone, somewhere in the regulatory process, understood that the defaults failed a lot of people for a long time. If you are watching this and you have adult children or grandchildren just starting their careers, this is the math I wish someone had put in front of me at 22. Not the advice to save more. Everybody says save more. The math that shows what saving even a little early actually does when the curve has time to bend. None of these habits feel like mistakes when you are in them. That is exactly what makes them so expensive. The most dangerous financial decisions are not the ones that scare you. They are the ones that feel like nothing at all. If this is the kind of math you wish someone would just do honestly, subscribe. I am not selling anything. I am just running numbers in public. And the next time you see a default checkbox, an enrollment form, a minimum payment line on a statement, I want you to remember the curve. Not the straight line your brain draws. The curve. Because the curve is where your money either works for you for 40 years or works for someone else. That choice is still yours.